Hey everyone, before we started the show, I wanted to tell you all about a really cool offer we have for our listeners right now. I play a ton of best ball leagues on draft.com, and when the season starts, I'll be live snake drafting dozens of new DFS teams every week on draft.com. The site and mobile app are both fantastic. There's tons of people already playing there with a unique snake draft DFS combo. I just love it. If you want to try it out and you deposit $10 as a new user, you'll get a 6-month free upgrade at FantasyPros' highest premium package. That will give you suggested picks during your draft, auction draft simulator, all kinds of custom settings for tools like the auction calculator, all DFS tools including the lineup optimizer, and even an auto swap for inactive players if you screw up and forget to take care of it before kickoff. To claim this offer, go to fantasypros.com/offer. It's just a $10 deposit and you can win money with that $10, so it's pretty much a no-brainer. Or if you're already a Fantasy Pros premium user, we'll extend you for free for 6 months at fantasypros.com/extend. All right, let's talk some football. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast with Mike Tagliere, and I'm Bobby Sylvester. We're on Twitter at BobbyFantasyPro and at Mike Tagliere NFL. So Tags, I read someone mention this weekend that Chicago-style pizza is actually a casserole. I wanted your take on this before we got into the football.
Is a casserole? What does that even mean? Like, I don't, when I think casserole, I think like it's in like a dish of some sort.
I mean, it kind of is like that, but I mean, it doesn't matter. It still has pizza ingredients. It's just in a different order. And it tastes a lot better.
I never really thought about it that way. That's like considering like a Pop-Tart a sandwich or something like that.
Yeah, I'm okay with the Pop-Tart being a sandwich, but
or ravioli.
Yeah, it being a casserole, like I think that's misguided because you've got like the crust on it, and you don't have crust under a lot of casseroles, do you? At least not the casseroles I'm used to eating. So, and the crust is kind of like a cookie. Like if you get the right Chicago-style pizza, Lou Malnati's, like the crust is a sweet. Oh, it's so delicious, man. I can't wait to eat it this weekend.
Yeah, if that's meant to be an attack at Chicago pizza, don't do that because it's the best.
Yeah, these people trying to attack it are just fools.
I think they just never had it.
I don't know if they were our friends. I don't remember who it was, but they're not my friend anymore.
Well, I'm one of those that like believes that pizza, there's no such thing as bad pizza and all that. Like there's some that are obviously way better than others.
You haven't had St. Louis style pizza, man. St. Louis style pizza sucks. And I'm from St. Louis. It's guaranteed diarrhea. Or as my boys would say, diaperia.
When we moved to Arizona, I was pretty let down by the pizza out there. But I mean, it was still okay. And then you could find some New York, Chicago places out there. But I tried New York pizza too. Like I have tried New York pizza.
It's awesome.
I think it's good. I just don't think it compares to Chicago.
It doesn't. Yeah. You're exactly right. And, okay, this is what we have planned for today. I didn't mean to talk about pizza that long, but I don't think our listeners mind based on the feedback we get. They love pizza. In fact, they attacked me when I said pizza wasn't my favorite food. Sorry about that, everyone. So I mentioned on the last show that the feedback our listeners have given have been extremely helpful. And we have a few ways we wanted to give back to you all, not just for supporting the show, but for making the show better. Number one, we're going to have a show dedicated to your hot takes, and that's what today is. Tags and I have like 15 or so lined up to discuss, and they're all really interesting. Sorry we couldn't get to them all, by the way. Number two, we have a signed David Johnson jersey to give away to one of our listeners from Pristine Auction. All you have to do to enter, go to fantasypros.com/contest. Takes like 30 seconds to enter. And last, and this one's going to be a blast, we've got a listener league for you all to compete with Tags and I. If you want to go to fantasypros.com/listener league, you can submit a quick entry to compete against us. And we're doing this league on Sleeper app, which has amazing league management. I love these guys' Sleeper app. Again, that's fantasypros.com/contest for a chance at the signed David Johnson jersey from Pristine Auction, and fantasypros.com/listener league for a chance to compete against Tags and I in a Sleeper app league. Now, Tags, before we get into the hot takes, there wasn't much in the way of news yesterday, but I wanted to really quick hear your thoughts about Peter King's report that Deion Kane has been the star of the Colts camp. Can you see him being Andrew Luck's number 2 right from the get-go?
You know what's funny is that Deion Kane coming out of the draft, when he was projected to go in the later rounds, I felt like he was a very possession guy. He actually dropped in the draft process. Like he was considered, I think that he was going to be a day 2 pick, and then people ended up dropping him down to day 3. I felt like he was a possession style receiver. I don't think there's much special about his game, but I think
like Jameson Crowder.
Yeah, I mean, Jamison Crowder is more like the slot guy, but I feel like Deion Kane watching him, he's just like a possession receiver that's not going to he's not going to scare a defense. He's not going to do anything like that, but he's pretty sure-handed. His routes are all right. Like, nothing is spectacular about his game, but if he's given an opportunity, I feel like he can produce. But with that being said, I don't expect him to have that job. This is Ryan Grant's job. And the report came out today that actually that Deion Kane has slowly been coming back down to earth, that people thought he was playing a little over his head, and now it's kind of like evened out, and that Ryan Grant is going to be the number 2 wide receiver, that Chester Rodgers, as we've been talking about in the show, Chester Rodgers is not an NFL player, guys. Like, he's never going to be a thing. If you're holding on to him in a dynasty league, let him go. It's not going to happen. I would much rather take Ryan Grant or Deion Kane.
Yeah, Rodgers is a roster guy, but not a roster guy in fantasy football. He's never going to be that guy. I think Deion Kane will be ready to take over next season. Ryan Grant's on a 1-year deal, right?
Yes, he's on a 1-year deal, and it's so weird because the Colts had 3 second-round picks. I really thought that they were going to draft a wide receiver, even with Ryan Grant there. They did draft 2 receivers in Darius Fountain and Deion Kane, but waiting until day 3 to do it, I don't know. It just strikes me as like
they could have got Cortland Sutton, man, and they didn't. I don't understand.
Yeah, James Washington could have been there for them. Now, I don't know if they need a field stretcher because they have T.Y. Hilton, but even Michael Gallup would have made a lot of sense.
They passed on him 3 times.
Yeah, I felt like Gallup would have been an awesome pick for the Colts, but that didn't happen. So I guess they're hoping on Ryan Grant to fill that role and maybe give him a contract extension in season if he does fill that role.
Absolutely. So, hey, I wanted to mention this, by the way. This isn't like an ad read or anything. The purpose of this podcast is to help y'all win your fantasy leagues, right? And I think one of those ways is we can tell you about the tools that FantasyPros has for you guys. And some of those, some of you have probably already used the mobile apps, but if you don't already, I want to just give you a heads up. Downloading the apps are free. Mock draft simulations are free. They take like 5 minutes. I've said before, you can do 3 or 4 over your lunch break. That way you don't have to talk to the people in your office while you're eating lunch. You can just eat your lunch, do like 3 or 4 mock drafts, and it helps prepare you for your drafts. Now, there are premium features like Draft Assistant that can sync with your live draft and offer pick-by-pick advice. I mean, this is so good that some leagues have actually outlawed it because it's basically cheating. And a few app features are Draft Simulator, custom cheat sheets, the live Draft Assistant, and Draft Analyzer. Plus, you can get a bunch of content while you're at lunch or laying in bed at night, alerts for breaking news, the articles at Fantasy Pros. You can even listen to the podcast through the app while mock drafting. If you haven't already, check out our mobile apps. They'll help you out.
Yep, no, for sure. And also, it'll give you, like, if you set up player alerts, you can get player alerts, basically, you know, if one of your players that you have on your keeper, on your dynasty, whatever, any news that comes out that we update, I'm doing a lot of those updates, Bobby does some of them, but where they pop up, if there's some news, you'll get news alerts right through your phone, right through the mobile app.
Even if it's not a player on your team, you can just say, like, hey, I really am interested in Stephen Morris's career.
Oh, God, no, but nobody's interested in that.
So if anyone would ever write about Stephen Morris, like, hey, Stephen Morris got cut again, you'll get notified.
It's like Christine Michael.
Yeah, exactly. It's very much like Christine Michael. Okay, man, let's get into the listener hot takes. And all of these came from Twitter. We used the hashtag FantasyPros Hot Takes. If you want to go look at all those, you can respond to them, say what you think, add some more of your own. And, just tweet at us at Mike Tagliere NFL, at Bobby Fantasy Pro. We'll respond to as many as we can. The first one here is from Matt. And he says Sammy Watkins is going to outscore Tyreek Hill in all formats and finish at least 10 spots ahead of him in end-of-the-season wide receiver rankings. Tags, I know you like Sammy Watkins above the expert consensus, which is, we get 70 guys, 70 experts, 80 experts together. We put all their rankings together and see where the experts as a whole stand on him. Tags and I are both higher on Sammy Watkins and lower on Tyreek Hill, but is this one a little bit too crazy for you?
It's not crazy. When we talk about hot takes, I think Bobby's definition, it was a good one, is if 90% of people would disagree with you, 90% or more would disagree with you, then it's considered a hot take. So there's definitely 90% of experts, or it might be, 95% of experts would say that Tyreek Hill should be drafted over Sammy Watkins. And I'm one of those people that say Tyreek Hill should be drafted over Watkins just because he's got experience in the offense. He's been able to work with Mahomes a little bit more often than Sammy Watkins did. This is Sammy Watkins' third offense in as many years. I know there's been a lot of Watkins hate out there, and especially yesterday on Twitter, I can't remember who it was. They were posting a lot of different, routes that he was running, and it appeared that Sammy Watkins was being used as a decoy because he never had a chance to learn the offense, and that's fine. This year, Andy Reid's talked about him being moved into the slot, playing all over the formation. He looks excellent in practice. There was a beat writer the other day said, make no mistake about it, Sammy Watkins is the wide receiver of this team. So when you hear a beat writer say that, obviously Sammy Watkins is impressing, as I kind of figured he would. I don't think that this is out of the realm of possibilities, to be honest with you. Would I be shocked if Sammy Watkins outscored Tyreek Hill this year? I would not. Would I predict it? No, but I think that's why it's a great hot take. I actually like this one.
I want to add to the definition of hot take. Not only is it, 10% or less think it will happen, I think it should be there's a 25% chance that it happens. So like less than 10% of people think it can happen, but there's a quarter chance it will happen. Not that it's likely, but there's a pretty good chance. Anything less than that and you're just kind of being a dweeb. Like just, saying something to just, it's flat out hyperbole. But, if you think this is actually realistic, yeah, I would say there's more than a 25% chance that Sammy Watkins will outscore Tyreek Hill. Him finishing 10 spots higher than him, it's right around 25%. I really believe that. Now, Tyreek Hill, he was a top 5 receiver last year. Sammy Watkins was 29th, if I'm remembering right, Tags. And so it would take a big change. But yeah, Watkins I think he's the more complete receiver. I think the Chiefs are going to use him in the way that you use a number 1 receiver. Now, that doesn't mean they're not going to continue to use Hill as a gimmick receiver, and he's the best gimmick receiver in the game, maybe in a long time. But yeah, I think this is definitely possible, Matt.
Yeah, in the end, I basically believe that both these players are going to somewhat let down expectations, because if you're on Watkins' side, I think he'll let down because I don't think he's finishing top 10 in his first year with a team. And then, Tyreek Hill being drafted as a top 10, I think he's going to let you down. I think that they're both going to offset. They're both going to have some weeks. But yeah, in the long run, I would rather have Sammy Watkins. But in terms of this year, I do have Tyreek Hill ranked ahead of him. So, but again, I think that the 10% is good both ways in terms of 10% chance of happening, 10% people, 10% or less agree with you. Just because I think the general consensus usually gives you a good idea as to the chances that it will happen. Like it's a general consensus. And I mean, if I was given 3-1 odds in Sammy Watkins, would I bet that? No, I wouldn't bet that.
You wouldn't bet Sammy Watkins beats Tyreek Hill 3-1 odds?
I wouldn't. I would want like 10-1 odds. That's basically what the public thinks.
Give me 3-1. I'll take that bet. You want to make that bet, Tags?
Well, I don't want to bet on Tyreek Hill.
Yeah, we're going to be betting on like 15 things if we do this year.
Let's hit the next one.
Yeah. So, hold on. I wanted to just say really quick, like, where do you have these guys ranked? Because right now, Tyreek Hill is going as ADP 29th overall, so the wide receiver 12. He's a wide receiver 1. Sammy Watkins is down at wide receiver 28. I've got them 19 and 22.
Well, yeah, I mean, I've got them a little further spread out, but mine is 14 and 26. So I have them they're separated, and I have Tyreek Hill higher. As I mentioned, I just think that there's going to be some big booms for Tyreek Hill. He obviously offers that big play upside. But Watkins, again, first year in the offense, I have to limit my expectations with him. And there was a report yesterday that he had to leave practice with somewhat of a hip injury. I don't know what it was. It seems like it's nothing. I'm hoping it's nothing. But yeah, we have to pay attention to that.
All right, next one, and this one is really exciting. I don't like to do them on like the star players, but I really want to ask because it's important for draft position. Like, where do you take this guy? Just how high is his upside? Dave tweets at us at MFL Miami Mafia. He says Aaron Rodgers beats Peyton Manning's single-season passing touchdown record. What do you think, Tags?
I love Aaron Rodgers, but there's no way in hell this is happening this year. Not happening. The Packers defense has gotten a little bit better. The Packers wide receivers. So if you go back, I was actually looking at this the other day because I was working on the on my series, the whole boom bust and everything in between series. And Aaron Rodgers, one of the only down years he's ever had in his career. Like legitimately, he was only a QB1 38% of the time in 2015. And if you go back to that season, it's when Jordy Nelson got hurt. So Jordy Nelson, it's not to say that Jordy Nelson makes Aaron Rodgers the quarterback. I think it just has to do, what does Jordy Nelson mean to this offense, and do they have time to replace him? I don't know if they replace Jordy Nelson in the offense. I think Devontae Adams is who he is. Randall Cobb is who he is. They don't know who the number 3 wide receiver is. Jimmy Graham is a ghost of what Jimmy Graham used to be. I'm not expecting him to put up double-digit touchdown numbers. I just don't think that he's the same player that people are expecting he is. I think people are expecting him to be, the Jimmy Graham that was back in New Orleans. That's not who he is as a player anymore, guys. He is a red zone guy, but developing chemistry with Rodgers takes some time. I love Aaron Rodgers again, but there's not a chance. I would bet on this one, actually.
I would bet against it as well. I'm just saying, like, I think that his upside might be there. I mean, look at this, okay? Think about this. He's already had 45 touchdowns in a season, and he only passed the ball 502 times that season. 2 years ago, when he was healthy, he passed the ball 610 times. So he would need 50 touchdowns, right? If he throws the ball 610 times, that's an 8.2% touchdown rate. Peyton Manning on his year 9.9, which is just absolutely absurd. That's like Deshaun Watson territory. If Aaron Rodgers can get up to 8.1% touchdown rate, which he's done in his career before, he could get to 50, and I'm saying it's a possibility. I know you don't like the weapons as much. James Jones had 14 touchdowns one year, man. He can make anyone catch a bunch of touchdowns.
Yeah, James Jones, the year that he did that, I want to say it was Greg Jennings and Jordy Nelson were still on the team. So it was like they were two legitimate wide receivers, and then he was the third one who was just kind of like one-on-one all the time, so Rodgers just threw him touchdowns. I don't know if they have that on the team anymore. I don't know if Randall Cobb demands anything. Seriously, Randall Cobb, people talking Randall Cobb up like he's been a wide receiver one. No, he's been pretty bad over the last few years. His ankle injury, he had surgery on it this offseason. It's been bothering him a little bit through training camp. Devontae Adams, he has never seen legit number one cornerbacks, on his schedule. Jordy Nelson's kind of taken that away from him. So there's a lot of variables with this offense. And it's not to say I don't like it. I do. I have Devontae Adams as like a top 6 wide receiver. I have Aaron Rodgers as my number one quarterback. But when you're talking about historical seasons, I don't think that's the case.
I don't know, man. I'm a believer. I think 34 is like the prime age for a quarterback, too. I'm looking back, man, at his seasons. 351 fantasy points, 399, 344, 358, 382. Are we drafting him too low? I understand waiting on quarterbacks, but he is so much better than everybody else.
No, even Aaron Rodgers in like last year, or like let's talk about the last 2 years. He's been a top 12 performer about 70% of the time. So if you can correctly predict a streamer 50, 60% of the time, you're going to be so much better, because where you're taking Rodgers, you would be taking a running back who's guaranteed 200 plus touches. You cannot find 200 plus touches later in the draft. So I'm actually working on an article that's going to be coming out next week. It's my QB primer for 2018. It explains why you don't take a quarterback, in the first few rounds. Like Rodgers, I'd start to consider him. It may be the end of the third, but most of the time it's like the middle of the fourth round is where I'd consider him.
All right, here's the next one. This one comes from Brian on Twitter. He says Marquise Goodwin finishes inside wide receiver top 12. Tags, is this a possibility?
I would say no. The only reason I'm saying no, it's not to say that I think Goodwin could finish top 20, but to finish as a top 12 fantasy wide receiver, you need to score some touchdowns, or you need to see like 140 plus targets. Marquise Goodwin has never been like a touchdown guy. He's been a deep threat. Now, granted, he's turning into more of a complete receiver, but unless you see him scoring 8 touchdowns, he's going to need to get to haul in to see at least 140 targets. And, Kyle Shanahan's already talked about the fact that this offense, they don't have a Julio Jones. They're not pretending that they do. They have players who play their role. When I hear that, I think of players who are going to see 110 or less targets. So again, if he's not scoring, those double-digit touchdowns, or at least scoring 8 touchdowns, it's not happening. So while I like Marquise Goodwin, I'm loving the hype that they're building up. It seemed like he had a connection with Jimmy Garoppolo. Top 12 is too high. If you were to say top 20, I'd like it. But top 12, I think that's less than a 5% chance that happens.
I would say more than 5. I would say right around 10 or 15%. And here's why. In those 5 weeks when Jimmy G was the quarterback, Marquise Goodwin was the number 10 fantasy receiver. He had 46.4 points, or 9.3 per game. And if you spread that out to a full season, man, that is a ridiculous fantasy player.
Well, right, but George Kittle wasn't seeing more than 3 targets per game. Pierre Garçon was hurt. They didn't have Dante Pettis. They didn't have Jerick McKinnon.
You're right. Great call.
If it was just Goodwin, if it returned to the same exact lineup that it was towards the end of last season, I'd say, yeah, it's a possibility, because I believe he could get 140 targets. I just, with all the additions there and all the pieces returning to the lineup and growing in the offense, I just don't think the target potential is going to be what it was, over the final 6 games of the year, whatever it was.
With that said, where Marquise Goodwin is being drafted, is he value enough that you're getting him on a lot of your teams?
I'm starting to, because I had him right around the wide receiver 36 to 40 range for a while, and I've moved him up to like around the wide receiver 32. So I'm starting to come around on him, and I've added him on a few teams. It's like there's some people that are willing to take him as a top 30 wide receiver. I'm not quite there yet. I'd rather take someone like Crabtree, who I feel like, the volume's kind of locked in. I like Devontae Parker a lot. And granted, I know there's been some negative reports out there, but I just think the ceiling's higher and the floor is close to the same with those two. So I haven't had him on too many teams, but I do have I have a couple shares of him.
Yeah, Marquise Goodwin, his ECR, again, that's expert consensus rankings, is wide receiver 39. So he's being taken after Will Fuller. He's being taken after Cooper Kupp, guys like that. Who would you rather have, Marquise Goodwin or Jamison Crowder? This is why I have no Goodwin, is because Crowder is being taken right above him.
In standard leagues, Goodwin, and PPR, Crowder.
I'm taking Crowder in both, and I'm taking Devontae Parker in both. I like Goodwin, but he's like my number 3 in that range, so I just really don't have many shares. All right, man, here's the next one, and this one comes from Walk, DFF_Walk on Twitter. He says that Keenan Allen will be the number 1 overall wide receiver. What do you think? What would you put the odds on this one?
This one actually has a chance of happening. So I would say I'd put this one at like a 15 to 20% chance. I don't think that it's any more than that. Just because Antonio Brown would have to get hurt. Julio Jones would have to score 3 touchdowns again. It's just going to be really tough for Keenan Allen to top the number that he did last year. Like he had a really slow start to the year, so I don't want to say it's impossible. And the fact that Hunter Henry is now, on IR, that's definitely a positive, but Mike Williams coming into the lineup might change some of that. But the reason I say it's, I'd say a 15-20% chance is because Keenan Allen has a legitimate shot at hitting 170 targets this year. It's very rare to find that in a wide receiver. And when you see wide receivers get above that 160 mark, they're almost a lock to finish in the top 5. So I that's why I say like 15-20%. I see him finishing at the bottom of that top 5 range just because he's never been like a double-digit touchdown guy. But do I think it's possible? Absolutely.
If Antonio Brown stays healthy, he is a heavy favorite, right?
The wide receiver 1. Yeah.
Right? I don't know. Was he going to be the wide receiver number 1 before he got hurt?
Yeah. Antonio Brown, he still actually finished last year as the wide receiver 1 in PPR leagues. In
PPR, okay, yeah. Hopkins was number 1 overall, but yeah.
In standard.
I mean, I'm looking at Antonio Brown's career right here. He's finished as wide receiver 1, then he missed 1 game and finished as wide receiver 3, and then he missed 2 games and finished as wide receiver 2. I mean, this guy's unbelievable. So the odds that Brown is the wide receiver 1 is probably like 40-50%. Plus Keenan Allen. I had someone correct me, by the way. They said that Keenan Allen is not injury prone. He's just had a bunch of fluke injuries. I mean, so is Kevin White, but fluke injuries tend to find people who have fluke injuries often. So I think that there's a better chance than most people that Keenan Allen will be hurt. Now, that's probably like 15-20% chance, but that takes away Keenan Allen's chances as well. But this is what makes me think this is possible. In the final 8 games last year, do you know who led the NFL in fantasy points?
Oh, I know it was Keenan Allen.
It was Keenan Allen. It wasn't even close. 121. Next best, Antonio Brown, 107. DeAndre Hopkins, 96. Julio Jones, 92. I mean, Keenan Allen blew them out of the water. He was unbelievable. 15 fantasy points per game in standard leagues. And in PPR, I mean, it was obviously a lot more because he's a reception hog. And in PPR, it was 22.9 points per game. Guys, that is ridiculous.
It is quite ridiculous, but I do want to go back to him in terms of consistency and the fact that people are remembering that last 8 weeks of the season with rose-colored glasses on. And the reason I say that is because people forgot how Keenan Allen was not very good over the first 8 weeks of the season. When you look at it, actually, in the article I released today, Keenan Allen was a top 24 receiver just 50% of the time. That's one of the lowest rates of those who are being drafted as a top 10 wide receiver. He was a wide receiver 3 or better 68.8% of the time. To give you a comparison here, Michael Thomas was a wide receiver 2, not wide receiver 3, but was a wide receiver 2 or better more often than Keenan Allen was a wide receiver 3 or better. And that's with Michael Thomas scoring very few touchdowns last year. So if you think that you're getting ahead of everybody by taking Keenan Allen over Michael Thomas, I think you're doing it wrong. And Keenan Allen did have a high target share last year, 10.1 targets per game. That was the 4th highest in the NFL. So the targets were there. I think they're still going to be there, but number 1, it's a hot take for sure, but I think it's one that can ultimately happen, maybe.
Yeah. By the way, those first 8 weeks, he was the wide receiver 23, outscored by Nelson Aguilar, Robbie Anderson. Let's see here, Michael Crabtree. So yeah, it's a little bit scary. Some serious upside though. I could see wide receiver 1 happening. Let's move on to the next one. Hey, actually, you know what? Before we move on to the next one, I wanted to ask you about the Marlon Mack news. I forgot to bring this up at the beginning of the show. They said they could see him approaching 1,500 yards. No way, right?
It's kind of like the Christian McCaffrey news. And I'm not to say that if they're going to use a one-back system, I think Marlon Mack absolutely can do that. The way he's going to get there is going to be a lot different than Frank Gore would have. And, the whole lightning in a bottle thing. Marlon Mack is not the guy who's going to consistently get you positive yardage. He's going to take chances. He's going to break some big runs, which is something that Andrew Luck hasn't really had in the backfield before. So I really look forward to Andrew Luck playing with some electric players like him, like Nyheim Hines. Jordan Wilkins is more of like he's not a guy that's going to break very many big plays. So I think it's possible with Mac. Do I think it's coach speak? Yeah, I think it's coach speak because it seemed the way they built this team through the draft, the way they didn't address the running back position in free agency, it just seems like Frank Reich is going with the Doug Peterson approach, where it's just like they don't want a running back to see more than 35 snaps per game, and that you're never going to see a running back with 35 snaps per game finish with 1,500 or more yards. So
well, they've already come out and said that. Like 1 week it's going to be Hines, 1 week it's going to be Wilkins that gets the majority of the touches, 1 week it's going to be Mac. You can't have him being in a three back split backfield and expect 1,500 yards. You're crazy.
Yeah, unless you have basically like what happened to Robert Turbin. He gets suspended, maybe Hines gets suspended, and Wilkins gets suspended. Yeah, then Marlon Mack, I think.
Sure.
Yeah, 1,500 yard back. That's what he is.
Or they just, use Christine Michael. Is he still on the Colts? Is he going to make the roster?
I have not heard his name in quite some time, and I haven't checked their official depth chart, so I could be wrong. I think that he still is. I don't think we've heard a cut because I'm sure Twitter would have said something about it. But no, I don't think he's relevant.
Yeah, he was getting some first down looks here early in training camp, but I haven't heard anything. So, okay, let's go to the next hot take here. And this one, you're going to like this a lot, Tags. This is from Rich. He says Joe Mixon will be 2018's Todd Gurley and will be the top scoring running back this season. What % chance do you give this? I think it's possible. I think it's more likely he would be in the top 5 behind, Bell, Gurley, Johnson, Elliott. Probably one of those guys is going to get hurt. One of them falls off. So I'd say there's a chance he goes top 3. Number 1 overall, I think it's got to be less than 5%.
I would say it's probably, I don't know if I'd say less than 5%. I don't think this is likely, but I think
it's the offense.
I think it's a good hot take, though. And the reason I say that is because the skill set is there. He has the 3-down skill set where people, they got so mad at Todd Gurley after 2016 and said that maybe he's not a good player in the NFL, but that wasn't the case, obviously. We kind of learned that last year. The offense will hold him back, though. That's the problem, is that Joe Mixon, playing for Marvin Lewis, he hasn't had a top 10 running back on his roster since back in 2005.
What?
Yeah, like his RB1, RB11, 2014, you go back, that's as high as it got ever since 2005. So the offense just it's not built that way. And as much as I love Mixon, the offensive line is still a work in progress. When you add players to an offensive line, the continuity often isn't quite there in year 1. Like it'll develop as the year goes on. They're going to get better and better, but I'm not going there. I like Joe Mixon. I feel like people are going to want to draft him as a top 5 running back next year. Well, maybe not top 5, but top 10. It all comes down to the head coach. And unless Marvin Lewis is fired, I don't see any way that Joe Mixon ever achieves that top 3 running back status, just because it's just the way the offense is run. Gio Bernard's going to get some snaps. Mark Walton, he's talked about getting some snaps. They still have A.J. Green, John Ross, Tyler Eifert. The red zone options are actually there. So it's just really tough for me to see that ceiling, which is why that's the only reason I'm not willing to draft Joe Mixon in the middle of the 2nd round, just because I don't feel like he has that number 1 ceiling. I feel like he's going to be an RB1. I believe that. But again, you don't want to draft someone, at their peak.
Yeah, he said, Tags, you said he doesn't have the RB1 ceiling, and what you meant, just to clarify for listeners.
Overall RB1.
The overall number 1 running back. Let me say this about Joe Mixon. If he was on the 49ers, I would definitely be behind this. I would say, 15, 20% chance it happens. If he was on the Bears, same thing. He's on the Bengals, so I think it's less of a chance. Now, it's a good hot take. It makes it's well worth talking about because he has a monster ceiling. I don't think it's going to happen, though. Top 3, top 5, I would take 15, 20% chance there.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with it.
So if you already listened to the mock draft episode from yesterday, you all know how Tags cheated and somehow finally beat me in a mock draft. Now, you might think I was up thinking all night about it. You'd be wrong, though. I'm not exaggerating one bit when I say I have never made it more than 5 minutes laying on my Leesa mattress without falling asleep. I just can't help it. Even if I had a rough day, I'm asleep within minutes because it is just that comfortable. I am not exaggerating one bit. A quality night's sleep helps you recover from distractions faster, prevents burnouts, make better decisions, improve your memory, and overall make fewer mistakes. It's not marketing, it's just science. To design a better mattress, Leesa leveraged 30 plus years of experience and hundreds of hours of testing to develop the perfect mattress for all body shapes and sleeping styles. Leesa's mission is to provide a better night's sleep for everybody. Through their 110 program, they donate one mattress for every 10 they sell. That's 26,000 mattresses and counting. Leesa strives to leave the world a better place than they found it, and that doesn't stop with mattress donations. Together with the Arbor Day Foundation, Leesa plants one tree for every mattress they sell and are committed to planting 1 million trees by 2025. Don't miss these summer savings. Get $160 off your Leesa mattress at leesa.com/fantasypros. That's LEESA.com/fantasypros for $160 off a Leesa mattress. All right, Tags, next one. This one's from Devin. Hopkins and Fuller will both finish as top 10 receivers with a healthy season of Deshaun Watson. And the reason I brought this one up, Tags, obviously I know you disagree with it. I definitely do too. I wanted to bring it up, though, because a lot of people think this is a possibility with Watson. Now, he's got to throw 60 touchdown passes, and if he keeps up his touchdown rate, yeah, it will probably happen. They will both finish top 10. Watson will have the greatest season of all time, but he's not going to keep up his touchdown rate, and Fuller is not going to catch 40 touchdowns like he would have if he stayed healthy all season.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and put a 1% chance in this one. I think this is hotter than hot takes. I don't think there's any possibility this happens. If you were to say there were two top 30 wide receivers in the Texans, I'd say that was a possibility, because I do believe that would be a possibility. It's rare for a team to have two wide receivers in the top 30. There's usually 2 or 3 teams that'll do it each year. But to say that you're going to have 2 in the top 10,
that's happened.
Not when DeAndre Hopkins is getting 170 targets.
The Packers have done that a few times. I'm trying to think who else has done it.
Again, that's the thing. People don't compare Deshaun Watson to Aaron Rodgers, the guy who's done it his entire career. And that's the thing that people are doing. They're drafting him next to Aaron Rodgers based on a 5-game sample size. It's not to say that Deshaun Watson can't potentially become that guy, but he's not. He's not.
His efficiency numbers, besides his touchdown rate, weren't mediocre. They were garbage. He was one of the worst in the league. He just happened to find the end zone a ton.
I'm not the only one to think this, though. Like I said, PFF graded Mitch Trubisky as a better quarterback than Deshaun Watson last year. And they're literally just watching film based on what the quarterback's seen. These guys watch NFL film all the time. It's not to say it's not subjective, because it is. But at the same time, they that's all they do is watch games. So Deshaun Watson wasn't like, oh my God, this guy's going to be a Hall of Fame quarterback. If you remember in the draft process, the issue with Deshaun Watson, he has no arm strength. His combine numbers were one of the lowest ever recorded at the combine. He doesn't have the arm strength to be Aaron Rodgers. He's never going to be Aaron Rodgers. He's not going to be Tom Brady. Deshaun Watson is his own quarterback. He's going to produce some rushing in that, but 9.5% touchdown rate.
Maybe. He's coming off a huge injury.
Well, he's going to have some rushing. They're saying that he's moving around pretty well, and I'm going to believe them on that because he's out there practicing in full where Carson Wentz is not. But again, the offensive line is pitiful. He doesn't have the arm to consistently get it down the field to Will Fuller, and that's where Will Fuller has to shine. Even though Will Fuller, by the way, we didn't even talk about this in the show. I'm sorry, I'm going on a rant here, but Will Fuller, he put on, I think they said 15 pounds this offseason, because he wanted to bulk up. I'm sorry, Will Fuller, you're never going to compete with DeAndre Hopkins for the possession wide receiver role in this team. So what the hell are you doing?
Yeah, you're getting yourself slow, man. Don't do that.
It makes no sense. Amari Cooper, I get it. He's a possession receiver. He wants to put on a little bit bulk. He wants to be a tougher guy to tackle. That's fine. Do I like it? Probably not. But am I okay with it with someone like a possession-style receiver? Yes, I am more okay with it than I am with someone like Will Fuller, who is not a possession wide receiver, who measured in with less than 9-inch hands. He's not ever going to be that guy.
I mean, I remember, if you haven't watched Deshaun Watson, you just remember the highlights or whatever, get NFL Game Pass, go back, watch the tape, watch his touchdowns, okay? He's throwing off his back foot into traffic, and he doesn't make the best throw. Hopkins just makes a nice play sometimes. The defense falls down. I'm not saying that happened on all 19 of his touchdown passes, but that 9.3% touchdown rate, it was the most garbage 9.3 that there has ever been. He played against some lousy defenses in that time. I'm not saying he's not awesome. I'm saying he is nowhere close to Aaron Rodgers. He's not Tom Brady. He's not Drew Brees. He doesn't belong in that top 60 pick discussion where he's being taken, and Will Fuller is not going to follow. DeAndre Hopkins is great. He was great without Deshaun Watson, but him and Fuller, I don't think so, guys.
Deshaun Watson, my career comparison for him coming into the league was Alex Smith. I felt like he could have been like an Alex Smith type quarterback, where he's got more mobility than like most quarterbacks, and I think his mobility is better than Alex Smith's, but his arm was in line. Alex Smith has actually had a slightly stronger arm, but I felt like it was a good career comparison of the two. And by the way, Will Fuller, in the games that he played last year with Deshaun Watson, 6 targets, 3 targets, 5 targets, 8 targets. you are never, ever going to be a top 10 fantasy a player when you're seeing that amount of targets. Never.
Yep. By the way, 61.8% completion rate. Guys that were higher, Jay Cutler, Joe Flacco, Josh McCown. Guys, it's really ugly. Deshaun Watson is not an efficient quarterback.
No, and we don't need to jump on him anymore, but seriously, like it just don't rely on Deshaun Watson to be someone that's drafted by Aaron Rodgers. If you do that, you're seriously just paying the price for someone who needs to be Aaron Rodgers in order for him to justify that.
All right, here's the next one. It's also a Deshaun Watson take. This is from Chief in Indiana. Pat Mahomes finishes with more fantasy points than Deshaun Watson. Now, I think this one also has a very low chance of happening, and the reason why is that Deshaun Watson does have those rushing yards. I don't think he's going to run a ton, but he's going to run plenty. He does have DeAndre Hopkins. I don't think he belongs anywhere near the QB2, but he's definitely a top 10 quarterback. Pat Mahomes, he's being drafted in some cases like a top 10 quarterback. I think that's his ceiling. I don't think it gets any higher than that.
Pat Mahomes, I actually disagree on that one. I think Pat Mahomes could finish higher. I think that he does have some mobile ability. Again, I mentioned this on a show, I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago, that his comparison for me was Jay Cutler. And Jay Cutler, again, had some underrated mobility to his game. If you go back and look at it, he was rushing consistently for 200, 300 yards. Very sneaky. It's kind of like that Blake Bortles, Carson Wentz type rushing ability. That's where Patrick Mahomes is. He's got weapons, man. It's not to say that Deshaun Watson doesn't, but the offensive line is worse in Houston than it is in Kansas City. The defense in Houston is better than it is in Kansas City. So you might see a regression in pass attempts with J.J. Watt coming back and their defense getting a little healthier. The Chiefs obviously have suffered a lot of losses this offseason. They have a young defense it's turning into. They have no secondary outside of Eric Berry. I actually don't think this is a crazy hot take. I actually like this one. This is Chief in Indiana. I actually love this one. And honestly, I would put the chances on this one. I would say 30%. Patrick Mahomes.
Ooh.
I would say 30% chance that Patrick Mahomes outscores Deshaun Watson.
Okay. All right, man. All right, this next one is from @thegoose5000. He says, thanks to Case Keenum, Emmanuel Sanders and Demaryius Thomas put up more points than Stephon Diggs and Adam Thielen. When I first saw this one, I was like, whoa, my mind was blown because it's a possibility here. I mean, these are two very good fantasy receivers in the past. Now they're getting older, of course, but Case Keenum was unbelievable last season. And then Stephon Diggs and Adam Thielen. Don't forget, Kirk Cousins loves to pass to the tight end, so I think Kyle Rudolph's going to be involved here. Dalvin Cook is going to get a bunch of receptions. I love Diggs. I love his talent. I have Thielen a lot lower. I think this one's a possibility, though, Tags. Do you agree with me?
I can't do it. Because basically the way I think about it is Diggs and DT, those could be close. I could see Demaryius slightly outscoring Diggs, possibly. But Sanders is so overrated, and I'm going to be like the only analyst that's saying that. I'm sorry. He's looked bad the last 2 years. And I know he's dealt with some injuries in that, but he's 31 years old. It's not like, he's getting better as time goes on. He's gotten worse. He saw 7.7 targets per game last year, which was really, really healthy. Do you know that he scored 7.9 or less PPR points 58.3% of the time? That bust rate is so high. I don't even...
The worst quarterbacks ever passing him the ball, though.
He did, but that's the thing. There's a lot of other players who posted, like Allen Hurns, for example, busted 50% of the time, and he only saw 5.6 targets per game. Marquise Lee only busted 30.8% of the time, 7.5 targets. The targets were there for Sanders. He's just not taking advantage of them. From all we're hearing is that Courtland Sutton is impressing in camp. Deshaun Hamilton has looked really good in camp.
He's going to be a stud, man. I'm not, stud is the wrong way to put it. He's going to be a very good receiver for a long time. Deshaun Hamilton?
Yeah.
I'm a believer.
I don't know how they're going to approach this offense. I don't know if they're going to slide Emmanuel Sanders in the slot when they go 3 wide and they're going to play Sutton and Thomas on the outside, because it seemed to me like it was going to be Thomas, Sanders, and then they were going to put Hamilton in the slot. But the more I'm hearing, the more they want to get Sutton on the field, which makes sense when you draft a wide receiver as high as they did. So I don't know. I can't say this one just because Diggs and Thielen are the guys. They're the wide receivers. Like the only thing that holds them back here is injury, I think. But obviously they both had issues with injuries over the last few years, so it's possible, but I think this is a hot take.
If I'm a Broncos fan, I'm drinking the Kool-Aid. I like what they've done with this offense. Case Keenum comes in, And it's just a humongous upgrade. You've got Royce Freeman coming in, who is a beast. I think he's going to handle the workload. They've got 2 extra wide receivers. They never had any depth. Now they've got it behind Thomas and Sanders with Sean Hamilton and Cortland Sutton. I actually think Hamilton might be more effective as a rookie. Both these guys are going to be very good. But look back at 2016, okay? Demaryius Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders, 16 and 20. That's where they finished in fantasy. Stephon Diggs and Adam Thielen, 29 and 30. Just 2 years ago this happened. Now that the Broncos get a better quarterback, I think that it's a possibility. I'm putting this one at 25%. And I think that the Chargers are the best team in that division, but I think the Broncos are right there. I think they're going to make the playoffs over the Chiefs and over the Raiders, who a lot of people still like. I'm not buying them so much, though.
Well, I mean, I know the overall numbers looked decent for Emmanuel Sanders from 2016, but like in terms of him as a wide receiver, it was not pretty. Like talking about, I talked about his bust rate and all that. He was a wide receiver 3 or better in 2016, just 40% of the time. So he had some big games. He had some wide receiver 1 games. There were 4 games where he went off for I think it was 20 PPR points. But then there was a whole lot of bad games in there in between. So, I mean, it might be a mixed bag on the way there. I think there should be some more consistency with Keenum, but there's also more competition for targets on the roster, which it's kind of going to even itself out. I don't see any way that Emmanuel Sanders finishes a top 20 wide receiver.
Okay. All right. This one's from Mike Sandman 62. He says Josh Gordon returns to camp in time to play some of preseason game 3. Successfully avoiding most of the unnecessary drama on the HBO Hard Knock cameras. Then he finishes top 5 among wide receivers in yards and touchdowns. Tags, what is Josh Gordon's real upside?
It's tough, man. Jarvis Landry, they paid him a lot of money to come in and be a guy. So, I've talked about it on the show before, is that there were no 2 wide receivers, no 2 teammates that finished with more than 107 targets apiece. So 107 was the cap. There were no 2 wide receivers in the same team who saw 108 or more targets. So are you going to say Jarvis Landry was brought in and they paid all that money to him for him to see, 5 targets a game? I don't think so. I think that this is going to be more of a timeshare at wide receiver than people expected. And the fact that Josh Gordon is not getting reps with his new quarterbacks is a problem. I understand that he's doing it for his own personal, and I'm fine with that. But what I'm talking about is from a pure fantasy standpoint, this is hurting his target projection. And he might be, he might come back to under that 110 target mark just because we're expecting this team to be a little bit more run heavy. The defense is going to be better. They brought in Tyrod Taylor not to throw the ball 600 times like they did last year. So I don't think this is going to happen. I do think he comes back, to be fair. I think Josh Gordon is going to be back with the team. I think the reason they traded Corey Coleman is because they know that Josh Gordon's coming back. I think they know exactly what's going on. I think the Dez Bryant thing is all...
They would have signed him by now if they were going to.
Yep, I think the Dez Bryant thing is all strictly for Hard Knocks. I think they're creating some drama for the show, and that's all fine and dandy. But Dez Bryant, if they really wanted him, he'd be on the team right now, and he's not. So I think Josh Gordon does come back, but I don't think that he finishes a top 5 wide receiver.
I don't think so either. And, do I think he has the ability to do that? Yeah, in the right situation, I still think that he has that. I don't think he's a 1,700 receiving yard guy, but he's not in the right situation. He's got a quarterback who doesn't pass the ball more than 500 times in a season. He's got a ton of guys to split touches with, including Jarvis Landry, who's a target hog, David Njoku, Duke Johnson, Antonio Callaway, all these guys. The Browns have a lot of weapons, and yeah, I think Gordon's awesome. But I just don't think that the situation is what you're looking for in a top 15 wide receiver. All right, next one here. You'll like this one, Tags. This is a Bears hot take. Well, I don't know if you'll like this one, actually. It's a double Bears hot take. From Terrence here. He says, Adam Shaheen outscores Trey Burton.
I mean, if there's an injury to Trey Burton, he does. Outside of that, there's...
Adam Shaheen is super talented. And don't get me wrong, Trey Burton is too. But if Adam Shaheen is on the field enough, there's a possibility he gets 7 touchdowns. Let's say Trey Burton gets, 2-3 touchdowns, 700 yards. Adam Shaheen could outscore him with 450 yards, 7 touchdowns, man.
Well, Adam Shaheen, so the way that the offense is designed, Adam Shaheen is not going to be heavily targeted. And that's just the way that the offense runs. Trey Burton's that guy. But I did tweet out, I think it was 2 weeks ago, that if something were to happen to Trey Burton, Adam Shaheen would absolutely have fantasy relevance. The guy's a red zone machine. And I think you saw it last year with him and Trubisky. So Shaheen was slowly trying to get some more snaps in the offense, as the year went on. And then obviously Trubisky took over. They started giving Shaheen a little bit more snaps. He only saw 14 targets, but he scored 3 touchdowns on those targets. So it's like he was starting to develop into the player I think that they hoped he would be. He had in 3 of 4 games, he finished with 39 or more yards, scored 2 touchdowns, and that was in a span from week 10 to week 14. So later in the season, he started coming on a little bit, but I don't think that the Bears would have went out and spent the money that they did on Trey Burton if they really felt like Adam Shaheen was ready to make an impact. I feel like they still understand he's a developmental player, but they needed that move tight end, someone who can actually,
they're different,
who could hang with cornerbacks. And I don't think Adam Shaheen, he's not fast enough to beat corners. He's more of a traditional tight end, whereas Trey Burton is more of a wide receiver tight end hybrid. So I do like Adam Shaheen, but yeah, this is definitely a hot take. It doesn't happen without injury.
I disagree. I mean, I know you know the Bears a lot better than I do, but I think that they can involve both these guys. And all it takes is, a weird touchdown season for Burton, and then Shaheen just being Shaheen. I see him being like a Mercedes Lewis last year in fantasy, where he's got, a handful of touchdowns, and he's not going to have all that many yards. He's not going to be super involved in the offense, but when they get in the red zone, Shaheen's the dude, man. I know you've got Allen Robinson there, but if I'm Trubisky, I'm throwing the ball to Adam Shaheen first.
I'm okay with him being a red zone target. I really am okay with that. But five touchdowns can only get you so far when you have like 200 yards. Because I don't.
Tyler Kroft scored 7 touchdowns last year, man. Shaheen can't do that.
Tyler Eifert was also hurt, so he was the starting tight end. When you're the starting tight end, you have an opportunity to hit 500 yards. You absolutely do. But again, it's just not with Trey Burton there. It's just not happening.
All right, man. Let's move on to the next one. Another player that you've been high on here. Mario, he says Amari Cooper will be a top 5 fantasy receiver this year.
I'm going to be honest, like as honest as I can be with you guys. Sometimes we have this crossroad with fantasy football and reality where we like a player so much and we expect it to translate to fantasy football, and sometimes it just doesn't, right? And Amari Cooper, he's someone I'm really struggling with in my rankings this year. Like I was actually adjusting my ranks this morning, and I have Amari Cooper at 14. I actually wanted to put him higher because when I look at players in that range like Tyreek Hill, I ended up putting Tyreek Hill slightly above Cooper. And the reason I did that is because they're both up and down wide receivers. Even before 2017, Amari Cooper was up and down. And part of that is attributed to his quarterback play. Derek Carr is just not very consistent. And, that stuff shows in the research I've done. But Amari Cooper, the talent, I want to believe in it. I know that John Gruden, his teams, every single team that he's ever coached has had a 1,000-yard wide receiver on it. When you look at this roster, Jordy Nelson's not getting 1,000 yards at his advanced age. Martavis Bryant was just ragged on in practice, saying that basically he needs to show up. They're saying that he could potentially be a surprise cut candidate, even though they just traded for him. So obviously, Amari Cooper is like the only guy in this offense capable of doing that. Gruden has talked him up ever since he got there. And when you talk about a wide receiver being like the focal point of an offense, like they're talking about Amari, it's like 140 targets. And when you get 140 targets, guys, you're essentially a lock to finish as a top 18 wide receiver. I really, really, really absolutely understand why some people want to be like, Mike, I'm done with the Amari thing, and he's just too inconsistent. I can't do it again. I get it. I really do. I actually understand where you're coming from because I'm someone who owns him in a lot of dynasty leagues. I'm not giving up on the talent here. And when I look at wide receivers in that range, like, do I really want to draft him over someone like Alshon Jeffrey? Or do I want to draft Jeffrey over him? Do I want to draft someone like Allen Robinson over him, who's got a lot of question marks as well?
Give me Cooper. I'm over both those guys by a ton.
And that's what I'm saying is like, I know there's a lot of people out there that'll say that they would rather have Jeffrey or Robinson, and that's fine. I understand why you're there, but I wanted to be honest with you guys is that I still believe in Amari's talent. I think Derek Carr is a very inconsistent quarterback. I think you're going to have inconsistent results because of that. But the part that I don't like about Cooper is that you kind of have to pay for it. Like, he should be cheaper than he is.
Agree. Yeah, I'm fine taking him where his ADP is. And if you don't know what ADP is, that's average draft position. So if we refer to that in the future, his ADP is he's going in the 4th round in most cases. I'm fine with him there. There's a few players I like their value better, especially if I have them 3rd round value and they drop. And there's always someone who drops in a draft. So I've got some shares of Cooper, not a ton. Let me ask you this, Tags. Would you rather have Cooper or Juju?
Oh, Cooper.
Yeah, me too.
Cooper for sure. I think Juju. I think if we see Juju get to 100 targets this year, I'd be pleasantly surprised. I'm projecting him right in that 90 to 100 range. So if he gets 105 targets, I'd be happy as a Juju owner. Where his targets are going to be much more efficient than Amari's because obviously Ben Roethlisberger is a better quarterback. He doesn't see number 1 corners like he's lining up in the slot. His slot targets are worth more than Amari's perimeter targets. So, but knowing that Amari is going to see Amari's a lock. If he's healthy, he is an absolute lock for 120 targets. Like a lot. You could put it in marker that he's getting 120 targets this year. So, I'll take the targets with Amari.
All right. I like this next one. I know what you're going to say, and I'm going to fight you over it because I think that you're wrong. All right. This one's from Brendan. Randall Cobb finishes as a top 8 wide receiver in PPR leagues.
I'm not down with that. I mean, it's possible though. This is a good hot take. And Randall Cobb is someone who moved up my rankings a little bit. I think I have him in PPR. I think I have him right on the cusp as a top 30 wide receiver. I'm not going to say it's not possible because, like I said, Devontae Adams is going to start seeing some really, really good cornerbacks on his schedule, and Randall Cobb is not. Nobody's really worried about Randall Cobb anymore. He's kind of like gone under the radar. So knowing that their number 3 wide receiver is a question mark still, knowing that Jimmy Graham might not be, the guy that the top 10 tight end that everybody expects him to be. This might not be this. I might be too low on Randall Cobb. Now that I'm talking about the whole situation,
I'm way too low on him. I changed my mind when I saw this hot take. I got to looking at it because I was like, I got to say this is wrong. I got to explain it. I got to looking at it. I moved Randall Cobb up from number 29 on my list to number 22. I'm all in. I am all in on Randall Cobb now.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, he did see targets last year. He got 92 targets in 15 games played. So, I mean, he was flirting with the 100 target mark, and that was obviously with, a bad quarterback situation. He's got rapport with Rodgers. He's a guy that has scored, 8 or more touchdowns twice in his career. Yeah, man, it's tough. It's like who do you rank him over, right? When you get into that range, that's my issue. Is like, do you rank him over guys like Corey Davis? Do you rank him over guys like Josh Gordon? You know what I mean? Like, I can't do that. Corey Davis.
Yeah, close. It's real. No, not over Gordon. It's close.
What about Crabtree? Like,
yes.
That's the thing is like, I could see putting him.
Marvin Jones, yes.
I could see putting him over those guys, but do you feel like really, really comfortable doing it?
Yep. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely feel comfortable. And here's the reason I had Cobb lower is Jeff Ratcliffe was on the show and he rightfully said at the time that Randall Cobb was not starting in 2 wide receiver sets. He was starting in 3 wide receiver sets, and Allison was starting in 2 wide receiver sets. Now that Allison's not even in wide receiver 3 sets, which is just crazy, by the way. We'll see what happens there. I don't know what's actually real, but Randall Cobb is the clear-cut wide receiver 2 on this team.
Yeah, no, I actually agree with that. And that's the thing. The cloudier that wide receiver 3 position gets, the more I want to believe in Randall Cobb. And I was on Allison because I felt like it was going to be spread out like that. But knowing it's possible that they have a rookie starting as the number 3 wide receiver, I think they are going to move Randall Cobb around more than they did last year just because of the limited options they have on the team. So, yeah, Randall Cobb, I think he's turning into one of those players you can take as a wide receiver 3 and start him as a wide receiver 3. I think you're going to get that value when he's on the field, but he's got upside for much more.
Again, I'm going to remind y'all, old man James Jones had 14 touchdowns. He was not as talented as Randall Cobb. Randall Cobb's 28 years old. Randall Cobb has a 1,287-yard, 12-touchdown, 91 reception season behind him while he was the number 2 wide receiver on his team. He finishes the wide receiver 6 that year. Jordy Nelson finishes the wide receiver 3. Aaron Rodgers is that good. Devontae Adams can be top 10. Randall Cobb can also be top 10 at the same time. All right, next one here. This one's from Roman. He says Royce Freeman is a top 5 running back this year. Do you think that's possible, Tags?
Do I think it's possible? No, I don't. I mean, I like him, and I've mentioned before that he reminds me of Jordan Howard as a running back, but the Broncos' offensive line isn't as good as the Bears was when that happened. The offense has a lot more pass catchers than the Bears did, so I don't think they're going to be running the ball as much on the goal line as the Bears did with Jordan Howard. And there's just other competition that the Broncos seem to not want to let go of. Phillip Lindsay, they drafted him late in the draft, and I actually liked him as a draft prospect, and I was wondering why he wasn't getting more love. He's a really good pass catcher. They have D'Angelo Henderson on the roster, who some people like. They also have Devontae Booker, who I don't like, but the Broncos I don't think they're going to cut him. So when you look at the landscape of the running backs there, I think it's going to be somewhat of a timeshare, especially when it comes to the passing down work. And if you're not getting passing down work consistently, it's pretty tough to finish as a top 5 running back. So knowing all this stuff, I do think it's possible that Royce Freeman finishes a top 12 running back. I just don't think top 5 is in the realm of possibilities.
You need 230 standard fantasy points to finish top 5. And in order to do that, you either got to get 330 touches or you've got to be Alvin Kamara and just have a ton of efficiency, like super long touchdowns and a lot of them. I don't think either's in the cards for Royce Freeman. If he was a bell cow back, if they gave him 350 touches, yeah, I'd say he has a chance because I think he's talented. I think this offensive line is better. I think this offense is a lot better. I think that Royce Freeman is the guy that you hand the ball to on the goal line. He's a Marshawn Lynch type of guy. The Broncos they've got these weapons in the red zone. They don't need to pass the ball in the red zone because I think Royce Freeman is a bowling ball down there. I think he gets 8, 9, 10 touchdowns this season. I just don't think the carries are going to be there for him to get enough yards to be top 5.
Yeah, I don't know if he's a grinder like Lynch. Like I said, I think he's more of like someone who is very patient. He follows his blocks extremely well, and he's got patience to know like when to wait for those holes to develop. So he does need that Broncos offensive line to play a lot better than they did last year. Jared Veldheer was added to that offensive line. I think he's going to be playing right tackle. So it's possible if Garrett Bowles takes a step forward in year 2, there's some things here that I could see it taking a step forward. But yeah, I think top 5 is just, it's outside of the realm of possibilities, but an RB1, I think it's a possibility.
I'm not saying Freeman's going to like run people over every play like Lynch. I'm saying at the goal line, he can do what Lynch does. He's that kind of guy on the goal line. He's a beast, man.
He's got that goal line role. He actually, he should like have hands down, like people. So anybody that's attended Broncos camp, they watch and they're like, people could tell you about the timeshare, but Royce Freeman's starting. Like he's the guy. And I've been saying that for a long time. Like you don't draft Royce Freeman where they did if you think that Devontae Booker has a chance to win that job.
So now that Sony Michel is, he's going to miss some time,
So
it
sad.
seems. Who do you feel most comfortable with of the rookie running backs between Royce Freeman, Ronald Jones, and Darius Geis?
Probably Darius Geis. I say that because he was somebody who was expected to go in the first round. There was some off the field stuff that never even materialized that pushed him out of the first round. The Redskins obviously had running backs on their roster, and Rob Kelly and Samaje Perine, who they invested in last year, but they felt the need to draft him. So it tells you exactly how they feel about the running backs in their roster. Chris Thompson talked about it. The doctors are telling him that he's not going to be 100% until November from his broken leg. And it's also a psychological thing with Chris Thompson where he's talked about it. He said anytime that he sees a defender, he just thinks about, what if that defender rolls up on his leg? What happens if I make this cut? The psychological part of an injury is just as bad as the physical part. And I can't overestimate that. Like in terms of like someone who's had back surgery and learning to trust your body again, it takes time. Some players can do it faster than others. And it sounds like Chris Thompson cannot. So Darius Geis is going to have that role. I think Ronald Jones is someone who people are undervaluing. I would almost put him in the same conversation as Geis. But Geis is just like locked in where it's like, I haven't heard much from Bucs camp, and I think it's very possible that we see Dirk Cutter fired after the first 4 weeks of the season. So with coaching changes and all that stuff, it can really shake up a team. So I'd say Darius Geis I'm probably most comfortable with.
I think so too. With Freeman and Jones, and I like Jones, but I like Freeman right up there with Jones. It's kind of a coin flip for me.
Yeah, that's fair.
All right, I've got a couple more here. This one is from Nick on Twitter. He says 130 plus targets for Corey Davis.
Oh, man.
They're going to pass the ball a lot more with Mariota this season.
I don't know. Derrick Henry and Deion Lewis signifies me that they want to run the ball more than their defense has gotten better there. I don't think they're going to need to throw as much. They're slowly improving that Titans defense, especially in the secondary, because the front seven's always been pretty good. This one's close. I mean, I think if I could project 130 targets for Corey Davis, I'd draft him as a top 20 wide receiver because the talent's there. But Taywan Taylor is making a name for himself. Delaney Walker is still there. Deion Lewis is going to get some targets. It's a hot take for sure. But I don't think it's out of the realm of possibilities, though. I don't.
Jags fans are going to hate me for saying this, and I'm one of you. I'm a Jags fan. Okay, I'm not, being a traitor here. I'm just telling you my analysis. Okay. Everyone says the Jags are going to run away with this division. They're going to be in the Super Bowl team because no one wants to pick the Patriots. Obviously, the Patriots are the favorite, but everyone else is like, I'll pick the Jags. They could have done it last year. They were really close. I think the Titans are going to win this division, man.
I'm going Jags because I think the Jags make the Super Bowl this year.
Okay.
I think it's them or the Chargers are the ones that I wanted to pick on the AFC side.
Yeah, I got the Chargers. I got the Chargers and the Packers as my Super Bowl picks. We'll talk about that again later, but I really think this Titans team is very good, and I've got them beating the Jags. I mean, remember, the Jags had the easiest strength of schedule last year.
Well, I mean, when you look at, the strength of schedule, they also made teams look really bad. So, I mean, that can go into it. I still think the division is mediocre at best. I don't know, man. The Jags defense.
Are you sure? Andrew Luck is back, man.
The Jags defense is so good, and they're so young too. So it's not like they're an aging defense like the Ravens were in the 2000s, where it was just like, oh my God, they're aging. Are they going to fall off? This is a team that's only getting better. The offense with Leonard Fournette, the upgraded offensive line. It's hard to find holes in this team, man. Bortles is the one who can hold him back, and that's the thing with the Titans.
But that's 50% of the team is Blake Bortles.
I think Mariota can hold the Titans back too. I think Mariota is overrated as a passer. I do. I think he's a competent quarterback. I think you can win a Super Bowl with Mariota. Don't say that. I didn't say that, but I'm just saying I think he's overrated as a passer. Like
Do you think Bortles could win a Super Bowl?
With that team? They got really close.
He's just as good as Joe Flacco, right?
I don't even think I'd go there, and I'm not a Flacco guy. But
okay.
But I mean, Bortles has shown flashes that he can be better than he's been, but he's never done it consistently. So that's where I'm kind of like, Bortles can screw that team, and that's why I wanted Alex Smith to go there, because it would be that team would be a dynasty if Alex Smith were on the Jags.
Or Jameis Winston, man. Put Jameis Winston on the Jags.
No, you need you need someone who could actually not turn the ball over. Because the thing is, they don't need much out of their quarterback. No, not Jameis. No, don't do that.
I want Jameis.
But I swear to God, if Alex Smith would have signed with the Jags, or if he would have been traded to the Jags this offseason, I would have went right to Vegas, and I would have made a bet on the Jags winning the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I think you're right, man. I think you're right. I didn't even answer the Corey Davis question. 130 targets. It's possible. I think this is a good hot take. It's something that could happen. I mean, he's got that Brandon Marshall type of ability and upside. We saw it in the playoffs last year. He wasn't very efficient last year, so I'm going to lean towards no, of course, but I'd give it a 20% chance of happening. They've got some other weapons, though. I think this is where Dez ends up, by the way.
Oh, no, he's not ending up there. That's not happening.
You don't think so?
No, there's no place for him unless something really bad happened with Rashard Matthews. I don't think Dez fits there. They like Taywan Taylor a lot, and I do too. I love Taywan Taylor. You can go back and look at my rookie profile before last year. I think he's a very good player. I would say the Corey Davis thing, the 130 targets, I'd say it's more like a 30% chance of happening. I think it's a legit possibility. They drafted him to be the guy.
Yeah, and he's got the talent, man.
For sure.
All right, next one. John, he says, with the Jags' improved offensive line and teams focusing on Fournette's running, Blake Bortles will Bortle his way to a top 10 fantasy season, and the Jags will have a top 5 running back and a top 15 wide receiver.
I don't.
Let's start with Bortles. Chance he finishes in the top 10. What are you giving him? 35%?
No, quarterback's deeper than it's ever been. Last year.
Yeah, but he was top 12 3 straight seasons.
Well, no, he was 14 or 15 last year. So
he was 12 going into week 17. Sorry.
Well, still, what I'm saying. So with Leonard Fournette there, you see that trending down, and it's going to continue to trend down because Leonard Fournette is that team. Now, in terms of teams focusing and stacking the box, they did that last year. Like Leonard Fournette was one of the running backs who saw the most highly stacked boxes in the NFL. When he didn't, when the Jags didn't, it's because he wasn't on the field. I don't see Bortles finishing top 10. I think quarterback is just so deep this year. I can't find a way for him to get in there. In terms of top 5 running back,
unless Fournette gets hurt. If Fournette gets hurt, there's a chance. But if Fournette gets hurt, you don't have a top 5 running back.
Correct. If you combine him and TJ Yeldon, you might. But so I think they have a top 5 running back. I think Fournette finds his way in there if he's healthy. There is some risk, obviously, with his past and his foot and ankle injuries.
I'm saying less than 50% chance Fournette's a top 5 running back. I mean, because think about the guys you've got ahead of him, right? Who are you taking him over? Bell, Gurley, Johnson, Elliott, Saquon? Not me. I'm not doing that.
Oh, man. Well, that's the thing is I believe he can finish over someone like Zeke and David Johnson this year.
I agree. He could finish number 1.
Yeah. I don't know if number 1. I just don't think he's going to catch enough passes to do it, but he's definitely got top 3 upside for sure. As for the top 15 wide receiver, I think that's more possible than most think, honestly.
I think that's least likely of the 3.
Well, hold on a second. So here's a stat I have for you. Marquise Lee and Alshon Jeffrey in 2017, each of them saw 7.5 targets per game. Marquise Lee finishes a wide receiver 1 23% of the time. Jeffrey, 18.8. All right, so wide receiver 3 numbers are better. Marquise Lee, 62%. Alshon, 56%. But people are not drafting Marquise Lee where they're drafting Alshon Jeffrey. And mind you, Alshon Jeffrey had a crazy high touchdown rate last year, so those numbers are actually inflated from touchdowns. I think Marquise Lee is being extremely underdrafted. I think he's a clear-cut wide receiver 1 in Jacksonville. I don't think there's room for 2 wide receivers to produce on a weekly basis. So I think it's possible that Marquise Lee finishes a top 15 wide receiver. I wouldn't put all those together and say, yep, Bortles top 10, top 5 running back, and top 15 wide receiver.
It's fun. It's fun to think about, but no.
Yeah, a little too hot.
I disagree with you. I think Lee is definitely the wide receiver 1, but I think he's the 3rd most likely to finish in the top 15. I don't think he has that kind of upside. Yeah, I think he's a safe play week to week. I think we've seen that for several years. If they have a top 15 wide receiver, it's either Keelan Cole or it's D.D. Westbrook. I've come around on D.D. Westbrook a little bit because I think Dante Moncrief is just going to get the shaft. Well, not really, because he's making $10 million to be their 4th or maybe even 5th wide receiver at this point. And I think D.D.'s going to start. D.D.'s got a lot of upside. But Keelan Cole, he did it last year for a 5-week sample size. For the 5-week sample size, he was the 2nd best wide receiver in fantasy football. He led the league in receiving yards. And now, if he starts, that's a possibility to happen. Not that he'll lead the league in receiving yards, but that he could be a top 15 wide receiver if he scores some touchdowns. He's a big deep ball guy. So yeah, I think it's either him or Westbrook if it happens. I would say 10% either of them do it though.
I'd put that Keelan Cole or D.D. Westbrook. I'd put that at like 2% chance that they're top 15. I just don't think it happens because Cole, while he does play the slot well and he might have a role in fantasy, if he's not on the field in 2 wide receiver sets, that's a problem.
Yeah, I agree with that. That makes sense. I said that was the last one. I want to do one more though. Okay, I want to give our listeners a bonus one. So why don't you pick one out here, Tags?
All right, so let me look here. I'm going to use this one. So John Stone FF said Rex Burkhead will finish with the most all-purpose yards and most fantasy points out of all AFC running backs.
Better than Isaiah Crowell. That's an easy one.
Well, that's a given.
Kenyon Drake. I don't see him losing his job to Frank Gore or Kalen Ballage. It would take an injury, but injuries happen. And then who else?
LaShawn McCoy.
The Bills. Yeah, McCoy could be suspended. Sony Michel could be out for a period of time. Even if he misses 3 games, Burkhead's going to play enough, even when Michel's back, that Burkhead could finish as the number 1 on his team. This is a good hot take. I think this is possible.
I think it's possible too. I've actually come around on Rex Burkhead a little bit, and I've moved him into my, I think, top 30 running backs right now. I moved Sony Michel down a little bit based on the information we're getting. Need to see how long he's out. But I think it's a hot take, though, because LaShawn McCoy, as of now, he's not on the exempt list. It seems like he's going to start playing in week 1. And if this drags out like most legal issues do, like with Ezekiel Elliott, I don't think the suspension would be handed down with LaShawn McCoy until next year. So I think it seems like he's going to play all 16 games. Even though we hate the Bills roster, obviously it touches equal points for fantasy running backs. So I think LaShawn McCoy is the one who would. And Kenyon Drake, if he's the starter, he's going to finish with more than Rex Burkhead. I don't think it's a terrible one though, because I think the upside with Rex Burkhead is actually as a top 12 fantasy running back.
Whoa. Wow.
I think that's his upside. Like when we talk about upside, and some people have asked me that question, I want to clarify. When we talk about a player having upside, I'll usually mention it along, like he's got top 12 upside. A guy that's being drafted in the wide receiver or RB30 range that has RB1 upside, that's obviously huge room for equity. He's playing for a top 6 scoring offense, actually a top 3 scoring offense, basically in each of the last 8 years. He plays, the offensive line is okay. I think it took a little step back this offseason, but we saw Dion Lewis last year, a guy who had never really carried a big workload. All of a sudden, he's RB1 every single week. Rex Burkhead can be used as a wide receiver while Julian Edelman's out. He could be used in the slot regardless, even if Sony Michel is back on the field. I like him. I really do, and I think he's going to turn out to be an awesome DFS play in week 1.
If you would have said Dion Lewis was going to be an RB1 almost every week before last season on this hot
week 1, and if this drags out like most legal issues do, like with Ezekiel Elliott, I don't think the suspension would be handed down with LaShawn McCoy until next year. So I think it seems like he's going to play all 16 games. Even though we hate the Bills roster, obviously it touches equal points for fantasy running backs. So I think LaShawn McCoy is the one who would. And Kenyon Drake, if he's the starter, he's going to finish with more than Rex Burkhead. I don't think it's a terrible one though, because I think the upside with Rex Burkhead is actually as a top 12 fantasy running back.
Whoa. Wow.
I think that's his upside. Like when we talk about upside, and some people have asked me that question, I want to clarify. When we talk about a player having upside, I'll usually week 1, and if this drags out like most legal issues do, like with Ezekiel Elliott, I don't think the suspension would be handed down with LaShawn McCoy until next year. So I think it seems like he's going to play all 16 games. Even though we hate the Bills roster, obviously it touches equal points for fantasy running backs. So I think LaShawn McCoy is the one who would. And Kenyon Drake, if he's the starter, he's going to finish with more than Rex Burkhead. I don't think it's a terrible one though, because I think the upside with Rex Burkhead is actually as a top 12 fantasy running back.
Whoa! Wow!
I think that's his upside. Like I when we talk about upside, and some people have asked me that question, I want to clarify. When we talk about a player having upside, I'll usually mention it along, like he's got top 12 upside. A guy that's being drafted in the wide receiver or RB30 range that has RB1 upside, that's obviously huge room for equity. He's playing for a top 6 scoring offense, actually a top 3 scoring offense, basically in each of the last 8 years. He plays, the offensive line is okay. I think it took a little step back this